Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on Swish City. I'm your host, Bruce Veliz, and in today's episode, we're going to be going over one of our last two teams here with the NBA season previews and off-season breakdowns as we have dived into every single team ahead of the 25-26 NBA season. And the NBA starts back today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get our first taste of basketball this upcoming season with two very solid games coming down this evening. And I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in and showing your support here on the channel. Like I said, we're going to break down every single team here with the last two videos going up today. And really do appreciate all the support you guys have been showing on these videos. So make sure to stay tuned by hitting that subscribe button and like button, as over here on Swish City, we're going to have an abundance of content coming up throughout the season, going over everything NBA, having some special guests on, and just having a great time talking about basketball. But as you guys can see from today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Cavaliers. And if you've watched the videos throughout the series, you would know that they are the final Eastern Conference team, which would be saying they're going to be my top Eastern Conference team. So what does that mean for the Cavs going into this year? Well, we're going to break down all of that and more in this latest episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. So like I stated in the introduction, this is going to be my top team here in the Eastern Conference. I'm not really going to give it as much of a shock because if you've seen the videos, you would obviously know, with it being the last day today, talking about these final two teams. And the Cavs obviously were the number one seed last year in the Eastern Conference, and I don't think this was a fluke. They obviously have a solid core built around together these great players, a great coach as well in Kenny Atkinson, and then this offseason made some even smaller additions here on the edges to bolster their depth, which was a big issue when they ran into the Pacers last year, as multiple star players from the Cavs dealt with injuries, and that's what ultimately had them get eliminated by the Pacers in the second round. One prediction that I did not see coming through, regardless of the Cavs ran into injuries, and that obviously proves to show you that the Pacers were a little bit better than what we expected, but the Cavs had some growing pains to get through, even if they had a dominant year last year. And this offseason, they went out and made some good additions. So let's go over those and talk about who the Cavs brought in first before we go over who they eventually lost. And they ultimately brought in two people from free agency, Larry Nance Jr. and Thomas Bryant, basically bolstering their front court depth here, specifically when, looking at their front court depth, it's obvious that Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen can play alongside each other, but it's also has been talked about that Evan Mobley could slot into that center position, and that could give the Cavaliers a little bit more leeway into customizing their lineup and giving them some more flexibility. But with having Mobley and Allen in this front court, it's very limiting behind who them is really there. And unfortunately for the Cavs, they didn't really have many people back there last season. They had Chuma Okeke, they had Tristan Thompson, but those guys just ultimately weren't enough for depth. Thomas Bryant, obviously, going with the Pacers last year, proved he could be a veteran backup big, hitting some big-time shots in some crazy games in the playoffs versus the Knicks and the Thunder. And then Larry Nance Jr. also could be a valuable floor spacer and three-point shooter for this Cavaliers team, which they could use in their front court, aiding alongside Evan Mobley, as he was realistically the only big man in their front court that could shoot last year. And then they went up and traded Isaac Okoro to bring in Lonzo Ball, losing some of that wing depth there and a former lottery pick that the Cavs had believed in, but one they had been trying to trade over the last couple of seasons. I know before even last offseason, they had his name in some conversations revolving around guys, in DeAndre Hunter, Dorian Finney-Smith, etc. They ultimately still land DeAndre Hunter using some of their contracts last trade deadline to free up some salary, but this year they do move off of Isaac Okoro and bring in Lonzo Ball, who's going to be some great help for them in their backup point guard situation if he can remain healthy. Obviously, Lonzo for the Bulls started off really well, transitioning from New Orleans, got injured, hasn't been able to really see the floor basically for the Bulls in those couple of seasons, retweaking stuff. Now is fully 100% after last year. He came back in the second half of the year and is ready to go. And I do expect Lonzo Ball, if he is to stay healthy, to be a viable asset for this Cavs team, kind of replicating that Ty Jerome role that was so effective for Cleveland in the last year and was seemingly impressive with Ricky Rubio just a couple seasons ago, and something that the Cavs desperately do need in this rotation, having that third ball handler and someone that can control that second unit, and Lonzo Ball is someone that can definitely do that. They also made two draft selections taking Tyrese Proctor and Salou Niang. Salou Niang coming from Senegal and staying overseas as a draft and stash, being a late second round pick. But Tyrese Proctor coming over to the Cavaliers and looking to make an impact this year. Proctor was on Duke University and has played with a numerous amount of talented players over the last couple of years, transitioning and playing from point guard to shooting guard to basically where the Duke basketball team needs him to be. And I do think that's going to bring a lot of his availability for the Cavs, kind of fitting in, either being that secondary on-ball handler for this rotation if he does rise in the group, or could be someone that could be used as an off-ball scorer that he's had some success in over at Duke as well. And then lastly, the two-way players for this Cavaliers team. There's only two signed to this squad as of this moment, and they were on the squad last year, and Luke Travers and Naquan Tomlin. I would keep an eye out for the Cavaliers to maybe add someone else as a possible two-way spot. There were some names that were recently waived over these last couple of days with teams trimming down their Exhibit 10s and roster spots. So maybe a guy like Precious Achiuwa, if he is available for a two-way spot, could be a possibility. I know he recently just got waived. Maybe there's some other possibilities out there as well for this Cavaliers team out there on the open market. Maybe like a Kobe Buffkin. But at this moment, the Cavs only have two players to their two-way slot. And with that, let's dive into who they lost this offseason, which I don't think was that big of key pieces that they did end up parting with. So looking at who the Cavaliers ended up losing in free agency, they ended up losing a couple of players more than they ended up bringing in, but let's dive into that. Free agency-wise, they lost Javonte Green, Ty Jerome, and Amani Bates. Amani Bates has that asterisk, and I would like to make known that Bates was obviously on a two-way deal with the Cavs last year, trying to make his spot on their team. Unfortunately, not brought back by the Cavs this year. Signs with the 76ers to an Exhibit 10 deal and was waived, expecting to go to the Delaware Bluecoats, where he'll be playing in the G League, trying to get to a roster spot. But the other two players, Ty Jerome and Javonte Green, were pieces for this squad. Obviously, Ty Jerome, very, very commonly used within this rotation, one of the better backup point guards last year, and commanded a deal here in free agency. But the Cavs fill in that role by drafting Proctor, giving Sam Merrill that extension, and still having Craig Porter Jr. within this rotation, having that point guard depth. And obviously, Jerome was a very, very solid playmaker, initiator, someone who could control that set of offense for that secondary unit, something that they're looking to have Lonzo Ball hopefully be able to take over for this team going into this year. But like I said, I do think Ty Jerome is going to be a little bit of a loss for this squad, and I think is going to be a big addition for Memphis once he does be available, as he is starting off the year injured so far, which is not great for the Memphis Grizzlies. And then Javonte Green is just some wing depth there. I do think that they obviously have a guy in Jalen Tyson who kind of plays that small shooting guard position and kind of transition into that combo S shooting guard / small forward that they would like to have for the offensive and defensive end, maybe being that little bit of a bump for a Javonte Green, not needing that additional depth, but they could very well in hindsight still need that additional 3-and-D wing, and Javonte Green could be a big piece losing. Also, they lost Isaac Okoro, which once again makes their wing room a little bit wonky here. Obviously, just looking at it so far at their depth chart, you got DeAndre Hunter and Max Strus. That's basically it. I don't necessarily know if that's what you would want to have if you're the Cavaliers. Obviously, Okoro wasn't panning out and was not worth the investment anymore. You would like to move off of him to try to get rid of at least some value. And for the Bulls, I mean, if you can get Lonzo Ball, who I think could be a great replacement for Ty Jerome, and maybe not lead you with such a big hole at that backup point guard, I really do like that. And then lastly, looking at their unsigned free agents and overseas players, they have two, Chuma Okeke, who went overseas to go play with Real Madrid, and Tristan Thompson, who still remains unsigned as a free agent. So that being said, that is the Cavaliers' additions and subtractions. So let's go over their depth chart and my predictions. Like you know, and like I've stated already, I think they're going to be the number one seed here in the Eastern Conference for many, many reasons. Obviously, I don't think it was a fluke last year with their squad that they proved they could be a top-tier team. Then they went and added DeAndre Hunter, who I think is that perfect wing to add into this rotation because he can complement you off-ball, but be a pretty solid slasher as well, attacking the basket, which maybe they don't really have on this roster besides Donovan Mitchell. I really like that for this Cavaliers team. But Darius Garland coming to start the year, hopefully can be healthy. I know is playing in training camp with a toe injury, so hopefully he'll be ready to go. Donovan Mitchell going to take that leap as this all-star guard and prominent figure on the offensive end, being that number one option for the Cavs. DeAndre Hunter going to be that switchable wing, hopefully finishing out most games for the team. And then we get into the big man rotation of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. One of the best big man rotations in the NBA, one of the best front courts in the league, but ultimately I think does have an expiration date, and I think it very well could be this season, depending on how turntables go through. I do think that Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley work great together, but I would love to see Evan Mobley as a starting center, where I truly do think he will thrive and be the best that he can be. Obviously, the Defensive Player of the Year last year still is effective at that power forward position, where he can complement Jarrett Allen, being able to stretch the floor and shoot the three-pointer. But I think if you have that at your center position with a power forward that can be a weak side help defender and someone that can be really, really aggressive in being a lob threat, then you can still be pretty solid in that role and utilize Evan Mobley even to a better ability with him being a little bit more of a passing hub and stuff like that. So I would really like see that move kind of go through, but like I said, they're going to be solid for this year, and we'll have to wait and see what they kind of transcend. Jarrett Allen, obviously a shot blocker, rim protector, really great rebounder, obviously struggles a little bit with the free throw percentage there, but just kind of your average rim runner type of big who's going to be a solid pick and roll worker, setting those high screens, and I think could give some great value to some teams, especially like Hornets or maybe even the Lakers that need that center availability. Maybe even the Pacers. A guy like Jarrett Allen, I think, could be an easy little flip for them to go out and address that center room, while the Cavs could still get some internal depth to help out their core, building around Mobley and Mitchell. But then we dive into this bench unit. Lonzo Ball, like I mentioned, he's going to be that dominant, hopefully backup point guard if he can stay healthy. But Sam Merrill was probably my favorite favorite re-signing that the Cavaliers were able to do this offseason. I really like his ability to be not only just a catch-and-shoot scorer on the wing, where he's able to be one of the better three-point shooters, but he also is a pretty solid playmaker and can control the offense. Depending if Lonzo does get hurt, they can kind of work him in playing some of that point guard position, and I think he's going to be one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA. I think he should be in the three-point contest this season. I think that'll be very exciting to see for the Cavaliers. Max Strus coming in with some injuries, so once again, a little bit of a hole at that small forward position, but something to keep an eye on with the Cavaliers, I think, is that small forward position and trying to add some additional depth there. Maybe like a Royce O'Neal 3-and-D wing if he becomes available from the Phoenix Suns at the trade deadline for a smaller contract, and I think that's something that the Cavs will look to go out and get. Larry Nance Jr. is ahead of Dean Wade due to the fact that the Cavs did try to move Dean Wade to kind of get out of these second apron restrictions and try to give some more flexibility for them. He could potentially be a tradable asset, similar something like Pat Connaughton, which the Bucks were trying to get off of last year. I could be seeing a similar story for Dean Wade, but he could obviously play and fit in really well with this Cavs team. He's obviously been here for the last couple of years, got that extension for being a quality role player. Now, seemingly some guys have really passed him, and he's kind of at the edge right there, competing for that spot, but he very well could having a good season and could be staying long-term and surpassing Larry Nance Jr., but I do think Nance Jr.'s ability to be a floor spacer is a little bit more of a better fit for this Cavs team, specifically working alongside Jarrett Allen. And then Thomas Bryant, I think, is just going to be another filler big, similar to where he was on the Pacers, just being like just another backup. Maybe they do look to add some of the into the front court with losing Tristan Thompson and just only having Thomas Bryant, but with the flexibility of Mobley and Allen being able to both play center and having Larry Nance Jr. and Dean Wade, I don't really think that's really necessary. And then lastly, looking at the other three players, Craig Porter Jr., Tyrese Proctor, and Jalen Tyson. Tyson and Proctor being some of these younger prospects on the Cavs trying to make some names for themselves. Who knows, maybe they can find themselves into this rotation. Tyson had a pretty solid preseason and I think can still be a rising star, even though I don't really know much about his name. I've only seen some stuff on social media with people really being bought into him. Tyrese Proctor is someone that I think can be a solid guard in this league, someone that I was a little high on in the second round, and I think is going to be a little bit of a nice replacement for Ty Jerome here within this rotation. And then Craig Porter Jr. once again has been playing with the Cavs for the last couple of years, has looked pretty solid and effective as an offensive creator within this unit. Once again, though, I do think if Tyrese Proctor does look pretty good, if Lonzo Ball is still healthy, then maybe one of these guys is kind of an odd man out in this rotation, and maybe they do utilize one of those contracts to go out and get another additional need, regardless if that's a defensive 3-and-D wing, regardless if that's additional front court help. I do think that would make some smart sense for the Cavs, because having 6 or 7, even quality 8 guards with Max Strus here, I think is a little weird, and having only one true wing in DeAndre Hunter is just a weird combination of building a roster. And for me personally, I know it's positional basketball, I know the way that things have changed, but from my understanding, I just like the concrete version of having at least 1 or 2 wings on your roster with a center. It doesn't really matter about the guards, but you know what I mean. I just like that the compactability and I guess completability of everyone just covering over and overlapping each other on the offensive and defensive end to make that cohesive unit. And unfortunately for the Cavaliers, even though they are my best team in the East because they have that great offensive duo in the guard room, they have the defense in the front court, I do think that mesh is still a little bit weird. The Cavs, though, even though I do have them finishing first, I don't think are going to make the NBA Finals due to those restrictions, and that's where I do think we see some changes coming into play. I think the Cavs in this core can be a dominant regular season team, a very fun playoff team, but I don't necessarily know if they can get the job done, and I think they need to make some little changes into their starting lineup to really, like I mentioned, kind of flesh out their team, moving Evan Mobley to center, finding a rebounding power forward to kind of compensate and help on the defensive end, getting some more additional wing help. I think this Cavaliers team could be set up for greatness. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I still think they're going to be a top-tier team in the East. They're going to be very fun to watch this year, and man, oh man, is the NBA season just right around the corner, legitimately starting today, and I can't wait to sink my eyes into some basketball once again and hear the great jingle of NBC for the first time in my lifetime. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys ultimately think on this Cavaliers breakdown. Like I said, we will have videos coming out here on the channel relating to the NBA throughout the season with having some special guests on. I'm not going to say it's going to be every single day, obviously, as there's not going to be, I don't think, that much to talk about with like these offseason previews, but definitely stay tuned by hitting the like and hitting the subscribe button here on this channel, as like I said, we'll have more content throughout the season talking about the NBA here, and I really want to kind of get bought into that this season, so can't do it without you guys. Really do appreciate all your love and support, and once again, thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you guys in the next one with our final video going live today before the season starts. But once again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this series, and I'll catch you guys later.